Hey, so I'm Albus and I'll be talking to you about the history of the Constitution of India. Now, to learn the history of the Constitution of India, we need to study history of constitutions too a little bit. And a constitution means the word constitution, it comes from the Latin word constitutus. The word constitutus, which eventually became the constitution. Constitution also means the ingredient of that thing, the thing from which it is built, the constitution of that thing. So that is also called constitution. So constitution of a country not only gives rules to the country to follow, but it also gives identity to the person who follows the rules. For example, Indians who call themselves Indians are Indians because when they say they are Indians, they are implying that they follow the Constitution of India. That is why they are Indians. They follow the rules prescribed in the Constitution of India, and that is why they are Indians, among many other things. So we have had many such constitutions in India. The latest one that we have is what we are going to talk about when I say the history of the Constitution of India. The current one created by Indians in India was the Constitution of India that we know of today, created on the 26th of November 1949. Now, to study the history of that constitution, we have to go back in the 16th century in the 1750s, in the year of 1756. At that time, in Bengal, the Nawab of Bengal, he died. His name was Aliwardi Khan, and he died, and his grandson, 23-year-old grandson Sirajuddaulah, became the Nawab of Bengal. Now Sirajuddaulah was a short-tempered person and he didn't go along with everyone. So when he got the power of Nawab, he got even more tempestuous, So he saw that the Britishers, the East India Company, which was just a trading company at that point, they were building a fort at Calcutta. Now Calcutta was not the capital of Bengal at that time. At that time, the capital of Bengal was Murshidabad, where the Nawab stayed. So when he saw that the Britishers were making a fort at Calcutta. Now the reason for making the fort at Calcutta was the Britishers were safeguarding themselves originally from the French, who were supposed to attack them, because at that time the 7 years war between the British and the French was also going on in Europe. So all their colonies of the Britishers and the French, they were warring at that time. So the Britishers thought to make a fort at Calcutta. Now when Sirajuddaulah saw this, he took it as a personal attack on his sovereignty. How could they build a fort there? So what he did in his tempest, he took his army and he laid a siege to Kolkata. And when the siege fell, he attacked each and every European he found in Fort Williams. He killed all of them. He destroyed Kolkata basically. There is also one peculiar case of a black hole of Kolkata. Now there was a dungeon in the Fort Williams. There was a dungeon, and that was meant for prisoners, and in there 2 to 3 people could fit. It was quite small, and in there Sirajuddaulah forced 146 people in there for a night, overnight, and most of them died due to asphyxiation. And when it was opened in the morning, like 23 people survived out of 146. The rest of the bodies were pulled out much later. So, and he was unapologetic about it. Like he said, I did this because I did this. I don't have to explain it to anyone. How could they say no? How could they build the fort in my territory like that? So he went back to Murshidabad. Now this news reached Madras. At that time, there was a Madras governor, alright. So, but that governor is a governor of the company because he governed the company, hence the name governor. So he was in Madras and he heard this news, and they sent 2 battle-hardened soldiers to fight the Nawab. From the Navy, Admiral Watson went, and from the Army, Colonel Clive went. Robert Clive, his name was, and the Navy went from the water route, and the Army went from the land. When the army reached Kolkata, they saw the massacre over there, and they asked people what happened, and they investigated, and they finally learned that it was the Nawab of Bengal, and they started marching towards Murshidabad. Now, in the way between Kolkata and Murshidabad, there is a small village at the banks of the river Bhagirathi. It was called Bhagirathi. It eventually became Hooghly. Okay, which the Hooghly that we know today. Its original name was Bhagirathi. Bhagirathi because of Ganga, because it's a tributary of Ganga. Anyway, distributary of Ganga. Anyway, so he started marching towards Murshidabad. Now, in Murshidabad, they saw that the British army is going to come, and it was a big army with cannons and everything. Now the thing is, the Nawab had a few years earlier, his grandfather had dug a trench at the eastern side of Bengal. It was a 3 kilometer long trench which was dug, which was supposed to stop the Marathas from coming any further, because at that time Marathas had reached the border of Bengal. So they could not take their horses and go even further into Bengal. A 3 kilometer long track was dug up. Now this turned out to work against them, because they could not themselves run away. So caught by the trench behind them and the coming army in the front, they had to fight. At that time, the French, whose people had died in Kolkata, by the way, the Nawab's men had even killed French. The French sided with Nawab, because at any cost they had to keep the Britishers as their enemy, because like I said, the European 7-year war was going on at that time. So they were led by a person called Fries. Okay, his name was Fries, and he eventually gained sainthood after the war, so he was called Saint Fries. Okay, anyway, so the French were also present over there. In the court of the Nawab, there were many people, including Mir Jafar, Rai Durlab, Lutuf Khan, and a few others, Swarup Chand, and there were many people there, and almost all of them defected. Now Mir Jafar actually met Colonel Clive's men at his house. Now till this point it is verifiable that he met his men. Okay, now what they talked about, and that is unverifiable, but the result which happened after that was Mir Jafar was bought essentially by the British, and he was not going to fight the British any longer when the war actually started. Same thing happened with Lutuf Khan and Rai Durlab. Mir Jafar, the word Mir means general. Lutuf Khan was also a general, not exactly a general, not a senapati, but Mir Jafar ruled over the western arm of his army. Lutuf Khan commanded the eastern arm of the company. Rai Durlab was a commander of a special unit of the Nawab, and the Nawab's personal guard was commanded by Sirajuddaulah himself. When the day of the war came, they met not halfway, but 20 kilometers away from Murshidabad at Palashi, at the small village called Palashi. This place, which the British anglicized as Plassey, there the battle happened, and hence this is called the Battle of Plassey, which happened in 1757. When both the armies came face to face with each other at Plassey, they suddenly stopped because there was heavy rain at that time. Now this rain was quite influential in the decision of the war, because the Nawab's men didn't cover their gunpowder and cannons for some reason, while the British properly covered their cannons and gunpowder. So what happened was, when the rain eventually got over, the Britishers could use their weapons, but the Nawab could not. His even guns had stopped working because they had not covered it or something, which was anyway useless, because the army's general were already bought and they were not going to fight anyhow. What happened later was, when the rain stopped and they had to begin surrendering essentially, at that time the French started shooting the British, because they were under no obligation, and they just started shooting the British, because alliance with the Nawab was less important than actual enmity towards the British at that time. So they just started shooting, and hence the British also started shooting from their side. This resulted in all the French people dying, a lot of British men dying, but those arms which I told you about, the arms of the army of the Nawab, they surrendered. They laid down their swords in front of the Englishmen, and they just were not going to fight. That's what they just said. So what happened was only the Siraj's personal bodyguard, only they died, and Siraj himself ran away to Murshidabad. He collected some money from his treasury, collected his wife, and he ran away to a certain nearby village. After the war, Mir Jafar was made the Nawab of Bengal because the original Nawab of Bengal he ran away. Sirajuddaula went to a nearby village where he was caught and publicly hanged with his wife by Mir Jafar's men. So, so Mir Jafar's men himself killed. They killed their ex-Nawab essentially. After the war, uh, Mir Jafar gave lots and lots of bribes to the colonel, and he had opened basically the treasury to the he could take whatever he wanted, and that was the arrangement. After that, after this war happened, a few years after that, mm, some British goods were held in a Portuguese ship at a port in Kolkata. Now the Nawab thought that now he could not touch the British, but that ship was Portuguese, so he could attend to that. So what happened was the ship was Portuguese, but the goods inside were British. So the British took this as an attack on their sovereignty. So they said, no, no, this Nawab is not going to work, and they put him in jail, and made his son-in-law Mir Qasim the Nawab, the new Nawab of Bengal. Now Mir Qasim was even more spineless than Mir Jafar because he basically just stopped asking for taxes from the British, and that the British obviously obliged. They were not going to listen to anything. Mir Qasim gave like 20 million pounds per year to uh, Robert Clive as a sort of payment for his post, the post of Nawab that he held. He paid that much money, and since he paid so much money from the treasury was going empty. So naturally, the Nawab thought that this money should now come from the people, but that was not very feasible. And after the Battle of Plassey was over, the Nawab of Bengal was particularly weakened after that. Now, what happened after this was the neighboring territories of Bengal, Awadh basically derived from Ayodhya. The Nawab of Awadh, he decided that this British was too much, this British invasion was too much, and they were eventually going to come to his town too. So he decided that it was not going to work, and he started rallying his troops. He even sent a letter to Mir Qasim calling him, rightly so, he calling him a fool to believe that the Britishers were anything less than his enemy. He also went to Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor at that time. Now, Mughal emperor is a dangerous word because he was not exactly emperor of India as such. He was more like the emperor of merely Delhi at that time, because all the other presidencies, the states that he held under the Mughal banner, were themselves princely states ruled by the Nawab, who paid no taxes or any loyalties to the Mughal emperor. So the name of the Mughal emperor was merely titular. But nevertheless, Alam Shah II, he saw this, and he too had started rallying his troops. He too had started modernizing his own army. So he too was sort of battle ready. Mir Qasim also later realized that these Britishers were never going to pay taxes like ever again. The taxes were 40%. 40%. So the local people living in Bengal used to pay 40% custom duty, while the Britishers did not, who were actually themselves foreign. So a lot of money which could have gone into the treasury simply didn't come. Rather, the other money that did come into the treasury also had to be given back to the Britishers. After this, what happened? Mir Qasim, Shujauddaulah, and Shah Alam II, they rallied their troops, and 300 kilometers away from Patna there is a small village called Buxar, and there the war started. There they had to collect their troops over there. The Britishers also saw this, and they sent a general called Hector Munro. He was from Nowar, and this guy was a 6.5, 7 feet tall giant, and he was a good general. So when the war actually started with them, the Mughal Scions, they lost. because of a silly reason, like they could not communicate with each other very well. Now a single army of Britishers beat all three armies at the same time under just one person's leadership, while the other side had three leaders without any coordination between them, and they lost. So this after the Battle of Buxar in 1764, this had shown the whole India that the Britishers were not only shrewd and cunning as they had been in the Battle of Plassey for the 1757, where they had simply bought their, not bought actually, because they eventually gained money from that too, but they had won using the wrong methods essentially. And after the Battle of Buxar, this had shown whole India that the Britishers were actually good at fighting too. They had disciplined soldiers and they had modern weapons. So this is also what gave them an edge. This suddenly made Britishers something to be feared of in the whole country. And suddenly even the Marathas and even the many other princely states in the country, they started fearing the Britishers, which also gave them an edge, because then they could use that fear to make them their friends and suck them silently without having to actually war with them. These two battles had shook India basically. After 1764, the next year 1765, a treaty was signed by Alam Shah to the Britishers called the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765, where the Britishers got Diwani rights of Bengal, Orissa and Bihar. Diwani rights means tax collecting rights. So the Britishers got tax collecting rights from these three places. Now these three places are very important because India at that time was the richest country in the world, and this is a verifiable fact. You can check Angus Medicine. India at that time was the richest country in the world, and the richest state in India was Bengal, the state of Bengal, the huge state of Bengal, which came all the way from Assam to Orissa. That huge state of Bengal was very rich, full of money essentially for the Britishers to suck, and they were there. So Diwani rights gave a lot of money and influence to the Britishers. They could have taken the Diwani rights for Awadh also, but they didn't, because they didn't want to push their luck too hard. But they got those Diwani rights. Also, a weird clause was in the treaty that Shah Alam II would have to leave Delhi forever. Like, the center of Mughal power would have to be vacant forever henceforth. And under the orders of the British. So that was a cruel thing that the British did. Shah Alam was eventually brought back to Delhi, but that was done by Marathas, and that was done by Marathas of all people, who were themselves people who fought the Mughals in the beginning of their political life. Okay, now Marathas are very peculiar because now in any country, for if you wait long enough, what happens, there is a certain kind of vibration seen. What happens is, a certain kingdom grows and grows and grows and grows and encompasses the entire land, and after a few generations it fractures, and suddenly there are many smaller kingdoms, and out of those smaller kingdoms, one of the kingdoms will again grow and again encompass the entire, I mean, as much as they could encompass the entire land, and then suddenly it will fracture, and out of those one will grow again. This exact thing had been happening in India at that time. So the Mughal power had basically died with Aurangzeb in 1707. With Aurangzeb, the Mughal power and entire fear of the Mughals had basically died out. Then at that time, out of those fractured power, the power that was encompassing the whole land were the Marathas. Okay, and the Marathas would have actually captured the entire India. Like I said, when the Britishers came, the Marathas had actually reached Bengal at that time. So the Nawab of Bengal would have to fight someone. If it would not have been the Britishers, it would have been the Marathas, for whom he was actually preparing at that time to fight them. So Marathas were coming. Now some British apologists, they say that the Britain had stepped into a power vacuum, but it was not exactly a power vacuum. Like I said, the fracturing of the power had just happened, and at that time they too had entered using their pitchforks. So the Britishers were never, to give credit to the Britishers, that they deconstructed the entire India, and then they were the ones who ruled India and made India one, is giving them too much credit, more than they deserve. Now let's go back to the Diwani rights. Now the Britishers, the East India Company had the right to collect taxes from the richest state in the richest country in the world. But what happened was East India Company went into debt at that time. After 1765, after the Diwani collection started, at that time the company went into debt. It was under debt for 1 million pounds, something around that, per year. It was under so much debt. They could not even pay the basic charter fee, as they called it, the charter that the Queen Elizabeth the first had given them. They could not even pay that small amount. So, but at the same time, the officers of East India Company became the richest people in the world of that time. Became one of the richest people in the world. So the money which was supposed to go to East India Company's coffers went into the pockets of the officers themselves. Now also, the responsibility of the administration of the people still went to the Nawab. So the money that the Nawab would have needed to administer his people, he didn't have it. He himself was paying to the Britishers, while the Britishers were the one collecting taxes, while they were not responsible for any mishap that would have happened. And the tax collection was extremely forced, and there is a long history of their crimes for just tax collection. So that is also a peculiar case of the Britishers. Now their greediness was not unknown to them themselves. When the British Parliament saw that the East India Company was going into debt, they decided that the company needs to be regulated. So in the year 1773, the British Parliament passed a regulating act of 1773, it was called, which was basically meant to check the corruption and the gross mismanagement that was happening in the country. Now this is where I shall stop today. Now I am trying to explain the history of the Constitution of India and maybe eventually the Constitution itself. So please consider subscribing and liking. Now also I want to say that when I am explaining this, I do not want to explain the I don't want I am what I am trying to do here is I just want to explain the legislative and administrative area of the history. I do not want to go into the history of the British India, which is a fantastic history to be studied, and there is a lot of material over there to be studied to actually understand human nature, if that is what you are calling is. But what I am trying to do here is I just want to explain the legal elements and the administrative element, that the acts and the charters that they did to govern India, and from where the Constitution of India that we know and love today actually came from. That is what I'm trying to do here. So maybe enjoy that, and I guess this is the end of the video, and I'll just have to stop talking, I guess. Thank you.